All right, I'm talking about the 400-year prophecy. The 400-year prophecy is in Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 through 14. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. In verse 13 it says, And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land. We were not strangers in Egypt. A lot of people try to use this to say this is talking about Egypt, when our forefathers was in Egypt. But Abram, who later became Abraham, was in Egypt. He had a wife from Egypt, Hagar. That's where Ishmael come from. They done trade with Egyptians all the time. Jacob sent his sons to Egypt. Joseph was a governor over Egypt. And this was all before we started going through affliction. In Exodus chapter 1, I think it's verse 6, somewhere in there. The affliction didn't start to the beginning of the book of Exodus. So when it says a stranger, it's not talking about Egypt, because we was not strangers to Egypt. I mean, Joseph knew how to speak Egyptian, and he had an interpreter. Joseph was the governor over all of Egypt. We had land in Egypt also. So when you read, when it says in a land that is not theirs, in verse 13, it's not talking about Egypt, because we actually owned land in Egypt. We was given land in Egypt in Genesis chapter 45, verses 17 through 20, chapter 47, verse 6, and verse 27. So we had the best of the land of Egypt. Egypt was ours. We had Goshen. It belonged to us, and our men was made rulers over the cattle. And plus, if you continue to read here in Genesis chapter 15, and you read on down to verse 18, part of Egypt was actually a part of the covenant land that was given to us. It says, In that same day, Yahuwah made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So when you read, when it says in a land that is not theirs, it could not possibly be talking about this Egypt. However, there was another Egypt that it was prophesied that our people would be brought to by ship later on. Maybe it's talking about that Egypt, because it could not possibly be talking about this Egypt. I'll get to that in a minute. I think that's in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 16. Maybe it's talking about that Egypt. So when you look at this, also you're going to notice that the numbers don't line up. The sojourning of the children of Yasharal until they left Egypt was 430 years, not 400. That's in Exodus chapter 12, verse 40. And the affliction didn't start till Exodus chapter 1, verse 11. So I'll go there right quick. Exodus chapter 1, verse 11, it says, Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them. Verse 12, it says, But the more they afflicted them. You see, now the affliction is starting. And right next door in chapter 2, Exodus chapter 2, starting at verse 1, it talks about when Moshe was born. So if you start from the time just before Moshe's birth, they call him Moses, you're going to see that that's when the affliction started. Now, unless Moshe lived in Egypt for 400 years during this time, it would be safe to say that Genesis chapter 15, verse 13 and 14 is talking about that time. But Scripture proved that he did not live that long. When you go to Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 7, I'll go there right quick. Deuteronomy 34 and 7. It says, And Moses was 120 years old when he died. So we know that he only lived 120 years. He was the one that brought the Hebrews out of Egypt. So they was only there in affliction from the time of his birth to about 120 years. Plus, you have to understand that you have to subtract the time that they spent in the wilderness, because they left Egypt and was in the wilderness for 40 of those years. Okay, that's in Joshua chapter 5, verse 6. Joshua chapter 5, verse 6, it says, "For the children of Yasharal walked 40 years in the wilderness." So, if you subtract, and I just had it wrote down, but if you subtract 40 years from the 120 years, it's only going to leave you with 80 years. I mean, we know how to add, subtract, right? So that's what you get, and it looks something like this. Just some simple subtraction there. 120 years Moshe lived, 40 years of that was in the wilderness. That only leaves you with 80 years that we was actually in affliction, starting with Exodus chapter 1, verse 11. So maybe the 400-year prophecy is talking about that other Egypt, okay, and not this one, because not even the numbers add up. So the other Egypt is in Deuteronomy 28:68. Okay, I just referred to that here just a minute ago. And in Deuteronomy 28, chapter 28, verse 68, it says, "And Yahuwah shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you," or no man shall save you, actually. But here in verse 68, we see we're going into Egypt again with ships, and we're being sold to our enemies. So what other place do you know of where we was brought by ship and sold? Okay, America. So when you go back and read Genesis chapter 15, verse 13 and 14, after the 400 years, it says this nation will be judged. And then we're going to come out with great substance. So we're still going to be here seeing this nation get judged, all kind of chaos, things are going to be going wrong around us. But against the children of Yasharal shall not a dog move his tongue. It's probably going to be just like it was in the first Egypt, okay? And if you want to see just how the 400 years apply to now, anybody can do research on this. If you look up 1612, Jamestown, Virginia, Atlantic slave trade, 1612, 1619, just do a little bit of research and you're going to see that somewhere around 1612 was the first ship brought with slaves on it that grew the first tobacco crop, something like that. And you're going to see that you count forward 400 years, you're going to get 2012, all right? Yeah, so I'll leave some more information in the comment section or in the description talking about the 400-year prophecy. And this is Elder Young One, and I'm out.